I'll just introduce this writer whom I have met in many festivals. Leslie Wicks, generally he writes under the pen name Les Wicks. He has been a guest of almost all the major literary festivals of Australia and many parts of the world. And he has published over 350, he has been published in several newspapers and magazines in 24 countries. His poetry has appeared in 12 languages. And he has been a guest of the Festival International de la Poésie in Quebec in Canada, which is essentially a French poetry festival. And in 2011, he was the first Australian guest at the International Literary Festival in Lviv in Ukraine. And later, he was also at Medellin, which is a major poetry festival in Colombia, which I also happen to have attended. And so many other poetry. I am not reading out a list of the festivals he has attended. In 2016, he published the book Getting by Not Fitting In, which was published in Australia by the Island Press, and El Asombrado, which was another of his publications just before that in 2015. And that happened to be his 12th title. So he has been regularly writing and publishing poetry. And I have also seen him as a major performer of poetry. I mean, he is not just a reader of poetry, but he often does what can be called a kind of poetry performance. And many of his titles have attained a lot of critical attention. The Sea of Heartbreak, for example. And several other books have won acclaim, several kinds of reviews and recognitions. And it has been said by the critic Ray Desmond Jones, Les Wicks has a capacity to invest ordinary truisms with moral and metaphysical nuances. These are tip of the iceberg poems, a surface you can see and admire, but with hidden depths that are both wonderful and disturbing. And again, in the ABC radio, he has been qualified. His poetry has been qualified as a mixture of prawn on the Barbie, stale beer, and thong suburban, with a sophisticated lyricism and openness to nature. Harvesting poetic truffles, line after line seems to have arrived entire. So there have been several, I have several review opinions about him here as a text. I'm not going into all that. And his fifth book celebrates the Australian summer. And then Appetites of Light is another of his major adventures in poetry, which is an exploration into the qualities of light. And the seventh book takes readers to peopled landscapes. That's called Stories of the Feet. So in short, he has been what can be called a committed poet. Committed poet here means a poet committed to the art of poetry. I think that is the primary commitment of any artist. So he has been a deep-rooted, committed kind of poet, and he has been continuously experimenting with style. He spans the vernacular performance poetry and a more denser kind of poetry, dense, linguistically dense, and sometimes dark explorations into poetic idiom and poetic content. He can be hard-hitting, he can be humorous. And he has also undertaken other projects, worked in various kinds of journals, etc. So in short, he's primarily a poet. He's also a performer of poetry and a great reader of poetry, and easily one of the best poets writing in Australia today, which I know from a first-hand reading of his poems. I leave the stage to Les Wicks. To improvise, he can perform, he can read poetry, he can talk to us about poetry, and at the end of the session, we will have something like 10 minutes for questions. I leave it to you again, but at least some 10 minutes, it could be more depending on what you feel like. We could have an interaction with this great poet of Australia.
Namaskaram. Hope I got that right. I'm more than a little bit in love with your city. the audiences, the crowds. It's been just so enriching. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Theoretically, we're here to talk to you. But in reality, I do much more listening than talking. And items like the Kerala School of Mathematics, the social justice issues that are alive and vibrant in this country. Thank you. The first poem I'm going to read is a sort of a prayer. I'll just need to explain a couple of things. It refers to swans, and in Australia our swans are black, not white. The currawong is a bird, a large black bird, a little bit like a crow. And finally, the expression, the peoples of the book, is actually a phrase from the Holy Quran, and it refers to the great three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It has a musical background which hopefully will kick in shortly, and the music is from a band called Gert. The poem is Beside the Road to War. Like a currawong's wing, combing tangles of air or the pulse of water skin on this sated lake. Let me be lazy. Beside the bat squill shift pitch fruits of a roosting tree, twigs secrete by the handspan brook, a minute dam of tadpole consequence, white cockatoos weed grumble. We cannot ask for still, so let me be lazy. Stock markets crumple then soar, money gibbers around the globe, roads stretch to fit our wasteland as soldiers camp on contended land. The Cyrillic of white on the black swan's wing is no battle plan for any general, but my eyes are indolent, those paths won't crack the world. A cranky call from the water hen to plains overhead. Then I'm back amongst gesticulated argument, still based in the caves. We need more, they want ours. Greed and fear again. Willows trawl the lake. Eels archive the histories of mud. Time to replace the tribal gods. They've started and won every war. The peoples of the book should throw those books away. There comes a time when blood outweighs the ink. So let me be lazy. I have painted all the pretty specks, done the overstand and the understand without illuminates or audience. My father is dead. Let the wet, cold tortoises mind the plinth well sing our hymns to fish. A seagull is whisking a cloud in the shallows. Your sleep is disturbed, your lunch. What surrounds us is not serene. Crows are singing Little Lamb. Each weed is a contest, but it's the violence of the blinking eye, harm of the skin, so let me be lazy. Chain each man of power to weathered wooden benches until the infusion of bird call subdues their hands. Immobilized eyelids will surrender to a day of casual forage. It's simplistic to say, simplistic to deny. We need peacekeepers to patrol our heads. With lazy as our prayer, train ourselves to say enough. Intelligence will listen as each day becomes its own statement of intent. Thank you. My next piece is a short one. I was on a beach in Asia, and this very strange creature was washed up on the shore, dead. And everybody was standing around looking at it, having no idea what it looked like. It was as close to anything as a dragon. Turns out it was actually a deep sea shark, very rare. But on one level, this poem talks about that. But it's also an image of the tourist in Asia and the inexplicability of the dragon, that incapacity to genuinely engage, was very reminiscent of the tourist experience. It's called Gilliland. This dozen amused tourists surround a dead dragon on the sand. Its last ferocity is the stench that armours each ending. Already delicate fins are trimmed to lace by the scission of crabs. Beneath, a coroner of flies' spirit is urged to shuck flesh. Harp of teeth reach out to voice a roadmap of spine leads towards the spume. Hygienically cleansed under flashbulb asepticism, any shift in tide will send this crashing to the tail. There is history, but it won't tell. A few years ago, I was staring appalled at the endless list of self-improvement books that were coming out. Make yourself a better person, make yourself rich, make yourself popular, make yourself beautiful. And poets, of course, are great magpies. So I had to put my own self-improvement piece together. And this is everything you need to know, and it's called Secret Seds. 1, my next book will guide you to wisdom. Certainty is fickle. Your dreams will wake you up. One can find truth in a bottle, but the light's a bit distorted. Books are worth their weight in wood. The only self-help book I ever read was Sex Manners for Men, 1969. I therefore speak with a boorish authority. Nothing belongs to us all. Be your hero. Vary your menu choices so we all can share. Investigate within reason, be nice, amuse yourself, then flip about, be your own tough audience. Money isn't everyone. Remember, the dismount is just as important. People in glass houses enjoy the view. 2, correct management of the teenager. Women should be warned. By the time you realize how simple men are, you've already acquired the habit. Say no to mugs. Brittany's sister is gluttony. Pretend to listen to your mother. Alone with a bone. Hair is the window of the brain. 3, love the truth. Love hurts, but it can be cured. You can't overfloss. Your dental hygiene is foreplay for marriage. Marriage is a short long-term commitment. Love is the carriage we ride on the boulevard of roads. Take a chance sometimes works out. Take a chance but don't get caught. It's larceny. Give him time and he won't change. Give her time and she won't change. Pleasure is its own resort. 4, all grown up. The adult is a difficult career choice. Courting. Dates are dried, sticky things that are best shipped away for foreign breakfasts. Sex would never reach minimum occupational health and safety standards. Some people can't dumb down fish and wigs. Position is an unconsciously sexy word that almost throwaway provocation. Impossible is best avoided. This man knows so very little. We're all the same. Our holy difference. Raising family, number 5. Childbirth is wisely fictionalised by all involved. And I'm sure the mothers out there know about that. Children are our future. Be afraid. The challenge is not worth it. I've met a lot of people, you're all silly, there is nothing wrong with me. We can all do better next time. 6, the future. Thrift is treason. Death is overstated. Age is failure. Intelligence can be lost with exercise and diet. The future can be expected. Travel is a crutch for those who can't be still. War is obsolete and functional. Invest in bricks and mortar. Watch where you're going intently. 7, transcendence. Go home, pilgrim. I have no story, just add 0. Solitude is noisy. Faith is a distraction. Space is unmarketable, thereby valueless. Lay down, stay, go home, sit. Any dog can comprehend this formula for a full life. Thank you. Cancer is a universal experience. And I found myself in a situation where the cancer patients and their carers, loved ones, family were somehow in the same position. It wasn't a clear dividing line between who had the cancer and who didn't. This piece is called Calibrated. Feed the stairs, roll the corridor like your last smoke at this edge of lamps. Someone chose this wacky orange for the waiting room. An array of tests. Why do they use military language? Cancer is coming, cancer is gone, moles bloom on atom geography. Amidst a darkling fever we delve. Double barrage, his cinched Levi's, our bones aren't a cage, armour defence, these constructs our words have mortared in around the pledge of mortality. No one would vote for this, but it's ours. The pitch of our dried mouths, we dandle children, parents, livers and lives. Beside me, she came all the way from Singleton. The husband is the shepherd of those dawdling optimisms. Raised voices from consult room 2. A teenager, frankly pissed off, won't stop anything. This is family too. Sometimes we pretend a gang, don't discuss the spirit or the spit. Our worlds are like the bubble in a level. They flip and quaver while we discuss the improbable mathematics of wellness scriptless. There is a revelation over lunch, a numinous ginger chicken. We will carry on for a time longer. A cross-guard formica, our love, yes, those words emerge easier now, is beyond the possibility of taint. The jostled queue of next days will all be worth the wait. Blood comfort serves, and that is the test. This is the answer. I love the heat, but it's an interesting thing being up here talking for an hour in it. A friend of mine recently looked after a child. The family was unable to cope, and the child had been to a number of homes. We've seen some orphanages here in Kerala. But it was a really fascinating experience watching this girl settling into a normal family life. It's called Little Imogen Black. Little Imogen Black is just a bit creepy when she cuddles him, admitted only under this sanctity of paper. In this foster life so far, 6 months, healed about delicate regulation, that relief of regular breakfasts, predictable nights with nothing behind her shoulders, she is allowed a childhood in the paradise of Tilapia. On a way, the daisy way, that only is seen from a distance like love. Imogen still wants to die in that crisp linen on her burnished bed. She keeps thinking back through the day, those clean smells. Now, not then. Ibis fly over the hill of fractured bones. Do you throw away broken parents? Lions of the ratty lounge argued over teams and demanded, boys will be monsters, then, not now. The senses of pizza and future, a good girl, desperately attentive, then hugs so normal, but so many, just so many hugs, it's discomforting. Show and tell, no bruises, a Pantene flick of hair, then she is there. Pack a lunch to the novelties of school, St. Bernadette's primary, painless cages, maybe games, a friend, fierce, tiny ambitions, so flagrantly normal. A spectator at the borders of radiance in the sun of her temporary family. She is ruled by an arthritic Labrador. There can be never enough of just now. Our tumoured world is smeared with the ichors of money, but this costs nothing more than this. I'm always fascinated at people who are quietly making a difference, like those parents who are fostering the child. We all hear about the heroes, but people who make small steps, who gradually add to our planet, are of the real interest to me. And there's 10,000 more of them, 10,000 times more of them than of the superstars. Each. 6 beers at the Bent Neck with Jimmy, where talking women, a susurrus of understanding can raise a thirst, but hey, Anna's doing David's artist bio because words can't be heard above his colour. Several strangers look out for the old bloke downstairs. He remains studiously unaware, but smiles regularly. Joan lives in full retreat, dementia and breakfast, but her flighty child Annabelle approaches 60 and doesn't mind. Tina has handed out green pamphlets to indignant Conservatives, an absolute giggle for 10 years, and the vote's up to 12%. Eric runs a workshop in toy making. They take longer than if he just did it himself, but 20 hands make the end product warm, finished. Auntie Rhonda discovers the Stradbroke midden is 25,000 years old. She tells anybody. It's not news, this accretion. Crowd of small, all in a messy mesh, can be a force. Roadside tides, quietly bowled above the brittle. In a patient daylight, all gardens glow. An acupuncture of hope leaps around the plate. The Greek god of the winds is, I'm probably mispronouncing this, Aeolus. I spent a lot of time in the desert in Australia. You have desert near here? Does Kerala have desert country? I know India has areas that are desertified, but there's a special state of mind you get into when you're standing in sand with very little near you for miles. You can see the horizon. So I thought this poem could explore the idea of what a desert god would look like, a god of the winds. It's called Aeolus at the Mulga, and Mulga is a stunted native Australian bush. The desert wind wears a blunt dust. Cantankerous yap lifts sheet metal from the deaths of snub-nosed Silverton buses, all cut like raw opal, pressed into a humiliating servitude. Windbreaks. Yeah, windbreaks for camels. Punctuation of crows are fixed on air. The land is your lungs, but flies have retired as the gale wails. Ants flummoxed by a vertebrae of quartz, red-veined. Beneath this lee my eyes are lost. This wind is a tide, only bones bask on gasping sand. That kangaroo spine sits prissy 90 degrees against the perimeters of stone. Go deep, don't assume, refrain. A huff of emus disperse like seeds as I approach. This is a vacated day. Feet crash on pepper. We have built much the skipsy jeans that jitter past our hands. Falter. This adamant shuts the mouth. Comes over spits. That coming shine we smelt from rocks. Death by a purpose, still destiny to bend. The nuisance of new sense. Only dry scat is left on the 100-kilometre mat. Concession is a prayer, excoriation. We make brushes. God could be a wind, and heaven is a spot safely away from its hands. This is a fabulous festival. It's actually not that common that festivals can be so engaged with the community that hosts them. And Australia, funding for the arts is increasingly shabby. our national broadcaster. There used to be a campaign in the 1980s saying that the average taxpayer only spends 8 cents a day to support the national broadcaster, which published poetry as well as a lot of other things. And that figure now has shrunk to 4 cents a day. There is one of the problems is that poetry doesn't have a big place in Australian society. And for years I've been wanting to have an international festival, poetry festival in our country, but there is just not that level of support, despite the fact that we are the most multiculturally diverse country on the planet. Something like 40% of our population was either born overseas or moved there. And I had an idea that I'd put a little package together to show Australians what they're missing. So I selected poets from around the globe who regularly appear at the international festivals. And I was really proud to include 2 from India. That's the only country that had 2 poets. So in many ways I'm preaching to the converted here. You've got a much stronger poetic tradition than we have. One of those poets was Satchinanda, and I think it's the first time poetry in Malayalam has appeared in Australia. So I'm really happy to have had a small part in that. And of course there was no question who to invite. Ismail Bey is now a solicitor in Australia, but he started off very differently before he came to our country as a refugee. This is a poem about him. It's called Boy Soldier. And I just need to tell you that bang bang is a drug, a combination of cocaine and gunpowder, okay? Cocaine and gunpowder. Boy Soldier. He talks about childhood and prays for old age. There is no middle. Ismail Bey shot their feet. After a day of screams, shot their heads for the birdless evening quiet. Soldiers in the grasslands reciting Shakespeare while they snort brown brown. He was 12. We are all programmed to believe a flaw in the biology of our flaky hearts on all those disappointing flags. Have any of the women among you ever wondered what on earth men are really about? They are a complete puzzle to you. And I know more than a few men have scratched your heads and wondered what on earth women are about. So I thought I'd help out. And this is a user manual for men, just for the women in the audience. The trick in all this trickiness is to deceive the nasty inner thing lodged under our not so hardy skins. Make sure we have access to tools. Use the river's sun-cut pills of tranquility, and outboards perhaps take us to our lover. Painting houses or epiphanies, there is always the excuse wrapped in a criminal shrug. One long declining tide, our story reveals wonders and desiccates simultaneously the horrible harmony of our ageing. Rule state men can hammer one item per day, even if it's just nailing an argument, meaning always convulsion and guts, and we never clean up afterwards. Spit flies from the driver's side window of a metallic green sports car. There is beauty everywhere and trajectory within vapours. Men fearlessly remove their fellow domestic pests, cockroaches, rodents. We're a problem that is not insurmountable, should be managed with tolerance and vigilance. Advised on appropriate clothes or counselled down to sensitivity, what we say is what we are. Take us out for a run, the north wind hurtling laughter through our thinning hair. We sing badly and rarely, but with great passion. Let us repair the shower screen. Lead us to your pleasure. We are better than cats for most household camaraderies. And I've never quite written the user manual for women, about women. Did you ever have a Nazi movement in India in post Second World War? It was an ugly and particularly racist movement, not with a large number of followers in Australia in the 1970s. I actually ran across one of the leading Nazi figures a couple of Christmases ago, and it was an intriguing intersection. It was Christmas time, so I've called this poem Ho Ho Heil. On the railway station, the ageing Nazi skinhead is just another baldy now. He's finished his last-minute Christmas shopping. Poking out from his festive T-shirt, those swastika tattoos on his neck have paled to a gunmetal grey. Torn cotton shorts on a multicoloured rail station, it seems like all his arguments have been fought to exhaustion. A smiling Muslim woman and her decorated pram pass. Excuse me. He carries a fist, like some limp Kris Kringle. Kris Kringle's a sort of Australian anonymous Christmas gift. But there's no party left. His festive ham sweats on the seat beside him. Rejoice. Like all the other energies, hate fades. Let it rain, let it sour. Mistletoe and other plastic celebrations are relentlessly bright, but he didn't say a thing. But this is valued knowledge. Children's feuds, the struggle in the queues, history clutters up summer, this season of giving hasn't given up. His phone rings, a loving family reels him in. Next piece is called Ward. He gets, in Australia there's an age pension. I hope there's one here. Means tested. Wealthy people can't get it. Ward. The 75-year-old ladies' man is all cut up in the hospital beside mine, in the hospital bed beside mine. He loves his dog, brags he once slept with a woman and her 30-year-old daughter at the same time. Some sort of summit for him, and they were both satisfied. He's lost most of his bowel, half his bladder, spleen, appendix, bits of lung, a snip of the esophagus, prostate, and finished with a distal pancreotomy. Reckons he's now the ideal weight for his age. Great pharmaceuticals, and you gotta hope, because his dog Jimmy is only 2 years old and wouldn't understand any thievery by death. Still got all his hair and a full pension, which is accumulating nicely while he's in the hospital. Professor Kure is happy with the surgery, but hasn't been around much since. There's a morphine pump and a cheeky Irish nurse. Maybe he'll get up next week for Jimmy. Nomenclatura Suras. The oldest river, a cradle of civilization, is now a drain. Eyes are everywhere. Beside this rumour of water, raw ideas are tortured away from problematic citizens. Some fools remain inquisitive despite all their schooling. Naked in the desert, naked in their jobs, the educated people are running numbers to survive. They fling their flattery to peripherally bask beneath a uniformed sun. No simple chore this. Men carry doors on their backs to ensure they are never opened. With a smile over twitch, masters below, masters procure, occasionally avoid atrocity as they meekly suggest moderation. Having family changes everything. To endure is a pilgrimage. Aromatic lamb on a bed of couscous, stewed tea, God's blessing of wise visitors who paint and watch CNN. This is savage. But they are not savages. Like a mirror, the fickle oars of sky drop bombs. Regime change is fashionable this year. There are efficiencies planned in the fictions of right. Years are nothing. What's rebuilt doesn't work just as effortlessly as the dirty system before that so many died to defend. Worry is pointless. Time is a grader. Across the quacking of historians, all mistakes will be buried under fresh initiatives. Yeah, that sounds great.
Now I think it's time for questions. If you have any questions to Leslie about poetry in general, his own poetry, Australian poetry, well, all kinds of questions are welcome. And after that, if there is still time left, he may continue reading.
Hello, Leslie. It was an invigorating and enthralling experience to hear you.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
It was an invigorating...
Mic closer to your mouth.
It was an invigorating and enthralling experience to hear you.
Thank you.
Your Australian counterpart in cinema, Paul Cox, said that cinema is a dying art. Some of the Western critics say now that poetry is also a dying art. Do you endorse that view?
I've got to say, Australian cinema is not healthy, and it's in line with most of the art forms and newspapers and television. We're in a society where there hasn't been a commitment by all of government to preserving culture and encouraging the growth of culture. Again, I'm sure you have problems both here in Kerala and across India, but I suspect even so that it's the languages and cultures of your societies are actually better preserved than they are with mine.
Sir, your poem on a cancer patient. Your poem on a cancer patient.
Yes.
Now I am reminded of a quote on life. Life is a genetic lottery or a random complex software or algorithm. That is why cancer happens. Because
Yes, the poem is very much about the randomness, but at the same time, it's like some theories about the Big Bang was that would continue, the stars would continue to spread out, and then they'd come back in again and correlate and coalesce. And I think that's what you see in the cancer community, a whole bunch of very disparate people with disparate illnesses and their carers and loved ones coming together to make a whole. I'm glad you got that.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful reading. I wanted to ask what exactly do you write about and what inspires you, but you cover from Greek mythology to everything else, so that question is not relevant now. So I'll ask a much relevant question. You've been in Kerala before, I'm not sure about that, but now that you're here, have you seen anything that inspires you currently from Kerala or Malayalam, basically?
Absolutely. What do you think it is? There was a poem intruded itself onto my relaxation time yesterday afternoon, and it was about the eagles. I've never been to a city with so many eagles living within the city. I found it a beautiful dissonance and explored it. You're probably so used to them, they're like pests for you. Australia has a lot of parrot species, and around my place there's hundreds of white cockatoos and rainbow lorikeets. You treat them almost like mice. You know, go away, go away. My partner, who lived in India for a year and a half working in a home for destitute and dying, lives on an island to the north of Sydney, and they have a limited number of these gorgeous species called king parrots, and they're just absolutely gorgeous, and she chases away these lesser parrots with this little stick of bamboo because she just wants to feed them. And I'd really be interested, maybe talk to some of you after the reading, how you view the eagles, the magnificent eagles of Koyakori. To the broader question that you're asking, any range of things can spark a poem. I'm not one of those who usually sits down with an assignment type mentality. One of our Irish friends was talking about that moment of inspiration when a poem comes, and I always like the quote from Walt Whitman, who talked about the flood of the moment. I do a lot of teaching, creative writing, and in Australia we're regularly plagued by floods, and like the Australian floods, everybody, and like the monsoonal floods in India, we all know that after every flood, there's a lot of cleaning up to do. And that's the editing process. That's the 10th, 20th, 30th draft. Any more questions for a while? I might inflict another. Oh.
Hello, sir. I would like to know about your views on politics and poetry. I mean, poetry might be politics inherently, maybe, I'm not sure. What is your views on, poetry being mixed up with politics or otherwise?
It's an interesting question because why? I mean, it's great the numbers here today, but why would you choose poetry to talk about politics? Get a jingle. Go on TV, be a journalist. But I suppose poetry is what we do. And the poem I read earlier about each individual making these small contributions. And because poetry is what we do, I think we have to apply those skills that we have across the spectrum. I write love poetry, I write eco poetry, I write political, I write funny, hopefully it's funny to you. I write interpersonal relationships. And I think a poet who doesn't engage with the spectrum of life and life's issues is a person who is failing herself or himself. Does that answer it a little bit? We try. There's a quote from a general who was addressing his officers before going into battle. And he said, "Men, the situation is hopeless. We must therefore redouble our efforts." And that's been my impetus through poetry.
I would like to ask you, what is the striking difference that you notice from Kerala and maybe your part of Australia? Anything different from in our attitudes? What did you feel?
I was talking to somebody about racism in Australia, and it's certainly been featured in the Indian media. And I was saying that you can't talk about racism in one strand. You actually have to talk about it in 5 or 6 different strands in the Australian context. And my limited time in India and in Kerala has shown me that I would be an extremely foolish man to suggest any conclusions. It is a diverse, vibrant, energetic, complex, but I love it. But I'm not sure even many of you in this space can actually tell me what Kerala's like. You could live here for years, I think, and not really know the true nature. Prior to coming here, I've been trying to read some of the news items about the state. The case of the Hindu woman who married a Muslim man. Something that you and I both share in common is the marvellous Adani company. I hope they're not listed on the sponsorship board behind us. But the Adani company wants to build the largest coal mine in the world in North Queensland. They're going to do it through a number of shelf companies many of which are offshore tax-free havens. I know that the Adani company is planning to build a port in your state and will have a monopoly for 40 years, and seems to have exactly the same principle, that no risk, guaranteed profit, who cares, who stands in the way. Anything else? We've got about 14 minutes. I could read you, might even try another musical one. What do you think? Can we do that? Oh, I can't. Sorry, it's the wrong book. No problem. I'd be interested to hear more about what it's like for a young woman growing up in Kerala. Of course, there's vast differences in cultures. I was at a festival in Istanbul, which one of our spots was a madrasa reading to kids. And after the show, we were walking out to dinner, and I was chatting about children with a young Ankara woman. And I said to her, "Oh, do you have any kids?" And she burst out laughing. And I thought, what did I say? And she just said, "Nobody in Turkey would ask you straight off if you have any kids. They'd ask you if you were married, and they'd ask you about your husband." The very suggestion that there could be a kids without a husband was absurd. And the second half of my latest book is a narrative selection concerning a young woman, and some of these poems will be in her voice. So this is me as a young woman, and the sort of choices that young women face, the disasters. I suppose Australian women have a lot of freedom, and what a lot of people don't understand is that also includes freedom to fail. Just get over it. My periods were always chaotic, and I was partying hard. My baby boy had a rocky road those first months inside me when my life was joylessly forgotten. Everyone promised, nothing was delivered. I sat by his sickness. Tiny Jim would cough like he was expelling the world. That shitty-toothed winter, I would constantly push the pram up, down Victoria Street that was so busy with connection. Prostitutes and social workers tutted in the gloom. Tony once dropped by Randy and broke. I hadn't seen him in years. Those years were severed strings. I once sat in St. John's crying to all those Christs who run the world. Blood on the door was some message. The minister sounded positive. All will have shelter from the blights of the Lord. Jimmy cried softer than died. There was so much sympathy for 6 weeks. 67 friends liked the funeral arrangements on Facebook. Everyone said it was time to get over it. I will live without compartments. Come down for dinner at our place. I couldn't shut up. The hail of lentils, conflagration of moment, all just another dinner in the suburbs. Cheered on by shadows, Matt and me were getting on. He understood ears always give the best foreplay. The briar of grey on his chin bobbled in harmony as I ran my stories. I couldn't shut up. Sparks, blood crowded the head, felt lights beneath my skin, no need for feet, that salsa is all in the eyes. Glare of interest, a new person first touch. Taylor and Liz chuckled at the stove, their friends tended to be broken things. Matchmaking was a favoured sport, and they felt a little proprietorial with Matt as he gave them the sperm for their baby. PJ Harvey, she's one sweet witch going off, let Indon shake and I shiver. The need with compartments is all those friggin' doors. Needing so little but fearing the cage, I tend to kick at anything solid. Sky and dirt, my fingers need to comb. He kept himself fairly fit, wouldn't have guessed he was 30 years older than me. Beer glistened in his beard, a rough hand snuck down my arm. A daddy thing going on perhaps, but who cares? Take me home, honey. I might just finish the reading section with a poem about port cities. I know Kerala, Kozhikode, is no longer a port city, but the hundreds of years that it was has gone to make it this unique entity that it is. And I was for a long time fascinated with port cities because in many ways they don't belong to the rest of the country where they're placed. They have more in common with other port cities dotted all around the globe, and the influx of not only people but ideas, vegetation, animals even. It creates this global network of these port cities. The compradors in corridors are whispering like lions. Capitalism's chicken or egg, everything is cooked so it doesn't matter. Townfolk are owned by their sea. Land is just an addendum alongside death. Bale's house, the mice of scholarship. There were poems in the rafters, and love breaks all the customs rules. Water hands and bags of rice, all fears stink of fish. The birds of message scour oily sand. There's true arts of need and guano are cried from holy towers. Shophouses like Joss, smoke flees the market down by the quay. Beneath the calico of our visions, there's a flailing beggar on his throne of scraps. Children run riot across 16 cultures, while all the wisdoms have left for afraid seclusion. Like the purple loose strife and monkey flower, port cities are the waterborne seeds of nations, needs, and atrocity. They bloom by rules that lords can't fathom. In these brisk lives, borders are small things. Nandi.